Today we're going to be looking at chapter 2 in your textbook. So this textbook is really about our first model of an economic situation and digging into the production possibilities, so the combinations of what a society can produce, as well as the looking at the beginning of trade and how we gain from trade. So we're going to talk about first what's possible to produce, and second why trade is beneficial, and look at some kind of models for that. So first we need to define what a model is. A model is just going to be a simplified version of some real world situation. So we're going to take something that's really complicated and has a lot of factors and boil it down to the most essential, make some assumptions, and then build a model and use that to draw some conclusions about what's happening in the world. The other things being equal assumption just means that everything except for the variable we're changing, we're just going to assume is constant. Right? So that assumption gets challenged sometimes, but that's going to be what we work with, because we only want to be looking at the impact of the variable we're changing, not at the impact of that variable and many others. So we're going to have to assume that everything else stays the same. The production possibilities frontier is one of the main topics for today. And that's going to be a diagram or a graph that shows the combinations of two goods that a society can produce. All right, so in class, we're going to look at a farmer and his production possibility frontier. Within these notes, we're going to look at a country's ability to produce Dreamliners and another type of airplane, and the production of clams and mangoes. So we've got two situations in the notes today. What can we use our PPF for? Well, we can use it to figure out how much we can produce of a good, what it'll cost to change production, and does it make sense to import? So are we relatively worse at making something than another country? So a PPF line shows you the possible combinations of what can be made. So on the right, you'll notice our production possibilities. That means we can make 30 Dreamliners if we make no jets. We can make 15 Dreamliners if we make 20 small jets, okay? Anything on the line is possible. So below is possible, right? Because that's less than what we could produce at a maximum. Anything on the line is the most we can produce. So on the line is the most. And then outside or above, we cannot. So not possible. Since we're talking about changing the combination of goods we produce, we've got an opportunity cost. So if we produce more Dreamliners, that's going to come at the cost of jets. So let's talk about the opportunity cost. So opportunity cost of a Dreamliner means for each Dreamliner, how much is my change in small jet? So that means we're basically calculating the slope. So we're going to do the change in small jets. And the opportunity cost is of Dreamliners. So that means that's going to be on the bottom, the denominator. So whatever we're doing the opportunity cost of is going to be on the denominator. All right, so we've got change in small jets over change in Dreamliners. So I'm going to use the first 2 points here. So for small jets, I've got 20 minus 0. And for Dreamliners, I've got 15 minus 30. So I've got 20 divided by negative 15. 5 goes into both, so this is the same as saying negative 4/3. So that means, since it's negative, which makes sense, right? If we increase the number of Dreamliners, we're going to decrease the number of jets. So the way I'd interpret this is for every additional Dreamliner produced, I need some more space here, so give me a second. Okay, so for every Dreamliner produced, we must give up or reduce the number of small jets by 4/3. All right, and then the bottom of this just reiterates what I said when we were looking at the graph. Below is possible, but not producing at capacity. The maximum number we can produce is anything that's on the line, and anything that's above the line is not possible. So this is our introduction to PPFs. So once again, looking at the opportunity cost, this is what we just did. All right. So opportunity cost is what must be given up in order to get more of a good. It's going to be our slope, right? And whatever we are looking at the opportunity cost of is going to be on the denominators. So if we're looking at the cost of Dreamliners, then Dreamliners is on the denominator. We've already calculated the opportunity cost of Dreamliners, so you don't need to write that one down. The opportunity cost of small jets we haven't calculated yet. So notice when I do small jets, I'm going to have small jets on the denominator. So in this case, I used the points 40 and 30, these 2 points. All right. And our answers, you'll notice, are the reciprocal or the flipped version of each other, which makes sense. All right. So when we interpret those, just like I said before, each additional Dreamliner costs 4/3 of a small jet. And then we use the other opportunity costs to interpret the other way. Each small jet costs 3/4 of a Dreamliner. Now we've got a practice problem, all right, with clams and mangoes. So I want you to read this problem and give it a go. We're going to put clams on the vertical axis and mangoes on the horizontal or the x-axis. And this is just the number of them produced, so we don't need to put a unit. And this is the PPF, so we're going to title it PPF for mango and clam production. I believe it's per week. Yeah. All right. So for this, you're going to first graph, and then this is going to be the opportunity cost. So you're going to calculate the opportunity cost for each mango and the opportunity cost for each clam. So go ahead and pause the video and give this a try. We'll look at it together in class. All right. Now, what does economic growth look like? So over the long run, what happens to our PPF? Well, our economy becomes more productive. We can now produce more of each good. And the way that happens is based on two causes. So we can increase the factors of production. So if we increase the amount of stuff we have to produce a good, like for instance, if we increase the amount of land and the number of seeds we plant, we'd be increasing our productive capacity, the amount we can make of whatever we're growing. And then if we have better technology like infrastructure machines. So if we go from planting seeds by hand to using a tractor, right, we're going to increase our the amount we can produce significantly. So what are some of the factors of production and the resources that go into things? Well, for resources, we've got land and labor. So land could be anything like the property itself or the resources that are in that property, like the water, the oil, the natural gas, the things that are under the ground. Right? Labor is just going to be your workforce or your employees. So these are two resources and factors of production, once again. Our physical capital is going to be the infrastructure, so the actual machines and like buildings that we have devoted to making the good. And human capital refers to the knowledge base of your employees. So as you increase your human capital, you can perhaps increase your speed of innovation, right? If you have more knowledgeable people, perhaps you can advance your technology faster, right? So now we're going to talk about the PPF between two countries. So the country with the lowest opportunity cost for producing a good has a comparative advantage in that good. And when you have a comparative advantage in a good, that's going to be something that you choose to specialize in. But we'll get there in just a moment. So as an example, let's look at the US and Brazil and their production possibilities for large jets and for small jets. So if the US produces only 30 large jets, they cannot produce any small jets. And if we're down here, we can produce 40 small jets and no large jets. So let's look at the opportunity cost for each. Once again, remember, opportunity cost is we're looking at the slope of the line, and the denominator is going to be for what we're looking the opportunity cost of. So if I'm looking for the opportunity cost of large jets, that's what I'm going to put on the denominator. So the opportunity cost of large jets, I'm going to have that 40, the change in my small jets divided by the 30, right? And I'll get 4/3. And then for the other, we'll have the change in our small jets would be from 30 to 0, right? We're looking right here. And the change in our large jets would be from 10 to 0. So we've got 30 divided by 10. Brazil has a larger opportunity cost there. And then if we look at it the other way, remember they just are the reciprocal, so we flip them. The US has a larger opportunity cost for small jets. So specialization, each country is going to specialize in whatever good they have a lower relative opportunity cost. So in this case, the US has a lower opportunity cost compared to Brazil in large jets. The US is going to specialize in large jets, and Brazil has a lower cost in small jets, so they're going to specialize in small jets. All right, and without trade, we can make fewer than with trade, because when we specialize, we're making more of what we're good at making and trading for what we're relatively less good at making. Then we have to talk about advantages. So a comparative advantage is when we have a lower opportunity cost for a good. An absolute advantage is when a country can produce more of each good. So if we look back at our graphs, the US can produce 30 Dreamliner, 30 large jets versus Brazil's 10, and 40 small jets versus Brazil's 30. So the US here has an absolute advantage in large jets and small jets because they can produce more of each. So take a minute to write that down. Pause the video. All right, now that you've got that written down, we're going to look at the circular flow diagram. So this is about how money works its way through our economy. So how it works from household spending to firms and then back into the pockets of households. So if you're thinking about this side, this is when the consumers buy stuff. This is where the companies make money, so the firms make money, and they're doing that by selling goods. And then that money is going to go into the factor markets, which is the things they need to produce the good. So remember, that's going to be your land, your labor, your buildings, the physical capital, the land, and the human capital. And then the money that goes back to households is going to come in the form of labor / wages. So this is how the money circulates through the economy. So as an example, a company that produces and sells vegetable products, they have the factors of labor, physical capital, and land. They need the people to plant the seeds and to maintain the crop and to harvest. They have the physical capital of the infrastructure that's needed to maintain that. So the tractors that they need to maintain their crop, the buildings they need to store it and process it, and the trucks that they need to bring it to market. They also have the land, which is what they need to be able to plant it on. So these are the factors they have to pay for, right? So they purchase those to produce the goods. The labor comes to our households in the form of wages, and then once they're in the households, our households spend that money on goods and services from that firm and others. And then those firms then do the same thing. They pay for their factors, the wages go back to households, and households spend it. So it's a circular flow. We're going to look at this diagram with a little more detail as we talk about the government's role in the economy. Now we've got two types of economics. We've got positive, which is just going to be describing what's happening. It's objective. So that's like when you're talking about the number of people who are unemployed, that would be an objective. It's just a statistic that describes what's going on. Normative economics is subjective, and this is where we're saying what should be. So we're prescribing. So this would be like, we should pursue this policy. So some progressive politicians might say we should have free college for all. We should have free Medicare for all. The government should be paying for those things. That is subjective and therefore normative economics. We've got some examples down here. So what I want you to do is pause the video and classify these as positive or normative. So normative is just describing what is. Positive is saying, making a judgment and saying what should be. Thank you.